Welcome. In the last video, I introduced the concept of primitives, which I said they were the building blocks of information. In this video, I'm going to teach you how we use these primitives in C++. So let's get started. So we have three primitives. First, we have states, which I said that is either one thing or another, one thing or its opposite. Then we have text, which we use to describe any kind of information. And then we have numbers, which is some information that we can do math with. Now, independently of the type of primitive, so it doesn't matter if I choose any of these three, what I'm going to call any piece of information, I'm going to use the term value. So when I say value, think of a generic term for any of the three primitives. So let's start talking about how we say or how we use these primitives in C++. So let's start off with states. So first of all, I use the word state to introduce this primitive. However, we do not call it a state in the programming world. The word we use is Boolean, or bool for short. And a Boolean value is that value which can either be true or it can be the opposite of that, which is false, right? So before, when I said state is either one thing or its opposite. Well, when you look at true and false, then it's true or its opposite is false. So in the last video where I used the inside of a car in order to explain these primitives, I said that an example of a state was the radio, right? If the radio is on or it's off, it's one thing or it's opposite. Where in here, we can use a Boolean to describe that by saying, well, if the radio is on, then that's true. If the radio is off, then that's false. All right. So we put every question that has two options as a Boolean, one thing or another, which we use true or false. The next thing that we have is text. Now, what's interesting about text is that not all text is of the same size. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take the word hello, and then let's take the word computer, right? The word hello is 5 characters long, whereas the word computer is 8 characters long. And the issue here is that we have to tell the computer how much memory we need in order to store this information, right? So if I say, hey, I want to store some text, then you have to say, well, how long is my text? So it's complicated to just define text as some kind of random size information. So what we do instead is that we look at each little piece of information within text, and that just happens to be characters, right? So hello has the characters H, E, L, L, O. So this piece of text has 5 characters. And if I was to go to computer, well, that has what? 8 characters, right? So when we look at text, for example, then what we actually care about is we want to look at characters, or char for short. And characters, inside of the computer, we define them with a little quotation mark. So it's something like this. And then inside the quotation mark, we put the character. So let's say, I put the underscore, and then we close the quotation mark. So if I wanted to say, for example, if I wanted to say hello, as I said earlier, one way would be an H, and then close, and then another open, and then an E, and then a close, and it will keep going like that, right? So we get five chars in order to say hello. And then like this, we can make any type of text, any length that we want. We can write paragraphs. We can write a whole essay, because all we do is we say, well, if my essay is 1,000 characters, then I need 1,000 of those. The reason why we have to separate them as characters is because we have to tell the computer exactly how much space do we need to store one piece of information. If we look at a whole paragraph as one piece of information, then that means we're saying the paragraph is always going to be the same size. But that's not true, right? What happens if you add a sentence? Then it's no longer the same size. However, one character, it's always going to be one character. You can't make a character longer or shorter, right? It's just one. And so we break it down into its smallest piece. And if we need more of those pieces, then we can actually say, hey, I need another piece to put together as part of my text. Whereas again, a paragraph, you couldn't say, well, I have this long piece of information. Hey, I need you to shorten it, or I need you to make it longer. We can't do that. We're not allowed to do that inside of a computer. We need to tell it exactly how much we need per piece rather per chunk, if that makes sense. So we go based on the size, we go based on characters rather than going in complete text. Lastly, we have numbers. Now, numbers is divided into two different categories. We have integers, or int for short, and the second thing is floating numbers, which we say float for short. Integers are numbers that are whole numbers. For example, the number 10, right? Or the number 11, or the number 9, and so on, for either way. So it's numbers that are whole numbers, all the way from negative infinity to positive infinity. And then floating numbers are numbers that have a fractional part. So if I have something like 10.5, 10.6, and so on, again on both directions. The reason these two are split is because, as I mentioned in one of our previous videos where I talked about binary number system, numbers, whole numbers, are represented very nicely in the binary format, which is the base 2 number system. The issue is that concept of a period. We do not have a period in binary, right? Because remember, all this information at the end of the day is represented by sequence of bits inside of a computer. Because we don't have a period, it's difficult for us to put these two types of numbers together, because then we wouldn't know whether there is a period or not, since there is no concept of a period in bits. So therefore, what we do is we say, okay, well, if my information has a fractional part, I'm going to define it as a float. And if my information has no fractional part, I'm going to define it as an integer. Now, of course, there are advantages to each, and we will talk about those later. And this is it. This is how we use the primitives in terms of these 4 types that we used in our C++ language, and for any other language too. Now, these 4 things right here, they're called data types. And this is because it defines the type of data, or the type of information. We use the word data, so we say the data type. Now, before we see how we use this in the computer side in C++, I have to also talk about variables. So on the next video, we're going to continue this idea of variables, on how we use these primitives that we call Boolean, character, integers, and float in C++, and how we define and create information as part of our program. So if you like this video and you found it useful, feel free to leave a like, and check out the video series if you're new to the channel. Subscribe if you like what you see. Be safe, and peace out.